soundcomav.com. We welcome in Mike D, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. Mike Detillier joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mike D, we were talking about Quinshon Judkins earlier in the show. Hell of a career at Ole Miss and Ohio State. Where do you have Quinshon Judkins going in the draft?
I have him as an early second-round pick. Actually, for me, it's Ashton Genty as the number one halfback. And maybe I'm a little different than most, but I have Hampton and Trevion Henderson, a 2-3, and it is close. I mean, it is razor close between the two of them. And then I have Judkins at the 4th spot.
Okay. We're visiting with Mike Detillier. Mike D's been covering the draft for almost 40 years. We've got it up in Green Bay here in a couple of weeks. It's going to be awesome. And Thursday night is the first round of the draft. We'll have at least a couple of Ole Miss players taken, possibly 3. We'll see what all plays out with Dart, Walter Nolan, and a couple other defensive players, actually. So, all right. So, Mike D, with you know how the league, it's a copycat league, and everybody kind of went away. They didn't go away from the running back, but they didn't put as much emphasis on it. And now that Saquon goes from the Giants to the Eagles and has the kind of year he did, and the fact that Derrick Henry is still got the juice that he has left in the tank, and I know he's an outlier, Mike D, but do you expect teams to go overboard? And do you expect the running back, even though it's deep this year, that more teams than we think will draft running backs in the first and second round than the last 6 or 7 drafts, Mike D?
Well, everything's cyclical. And I think there'll be 2 running backs picked in round 1, but we saw that a couple years back. So I think in every year it's a little bit of supply and demand, which you have out there. This is a really rich year at running back. So the narrative, which is a false one, is that teams, they picked running back because of Saquon. What they're going to load up on is offensive linemen. Okay? Saquon Barkley, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him, he was a good back in New York. He became a great back in Philly because their offensive line. Okay, he wasn't running through those holes in New York like he is in Philly. It's a different situation. But people who don't study the game fall into, we got to pick running backs. Okay? The Giants did that too. But Saquon wasn't the same player. They didn't build that offensive line like what the Eagles did. What you will see in the first and second round is a run in a very light area. Offensive linemen. Just because every team needs one, at least one. And the Saints, they probably could use a couple. I do think when you look at it as a whole, what the Eagles showed you was you went up front, offensive, defensive line. And it is a rich area defensive line-wise. You'll see out of my top 75, 24 of the 75 are defensive linemen.
Wow.
Either interior or on the edge.
Wow.
Offensive line is not nearly as good as it was a year ago or 2 years ago. It's just not that type draft. And every year there's a little bit of an up and down. So there's not as many, but those guys are not going to wait long to get called. And I think when you watch the game closely, what the Eagles did was build up front. And then they dropped the halfback in. And Barkley, who was an immensely gifted back, but, in New York, he wasn't having any lanes to run through. And I do think there is a false narrative out there that, they're going to pick all kind of running backs. That won't happen this year because it is an overloaded year. What's really going to be a run in a year where they don't have a ton of offensive linemen? They're going to peel off that board real quick in the first and second round. If you need linemen, you better get them early because they're not going to stay there. And look what you're paying quarterbacks today. So you need to protect them.
Good point.
And that offensive line, it goes right back to it. And as much, Bo, as we get away from a little bit of this game has changed, and it has in some areas, the one thing it hasn't changed, if you don't win up front, offensive, defensive line, you ain't winning anywhere. And I think here we saw the best player in the game. He became a mere mortal when his offensive line couldn't match up against the Eagles' defensive front. Oh. Patrick Mahomes was really jittery in that pocket, and they got after him. And so where there will be more running backs picked, and it is a really healthy year at running back, I don't know that it will overload the first round or overload round 2. Where I think you will see a big run on running backs is round 3 and 4. I think, man, in a year where there's a lot of backs, though, that's where you're going to see the peel off. And I learned this years ago. I had a former NFL coach live next door to me, and Joe Clark. He was actually the backup quarterback to Otto Graham with the Cleveland Browns. And so he started coaching under Paul Brown, and he coached into his 80s before his health started to wane. And he told me, he said, years ago when I was doing this, he's like, I'm going to tell you something. The Greeks settled this years ago. When you had a chance to pick a really talented big man or a really talented small guy, the big man wins out every time.
Yeah.
And I think we still into that, what it is, thousands of years, and yet it's still sort of that way.
But, Mike, don't you agree that some franchises that aren't run well, they'll go for the splash when they need to go for a dude in the trenches like you're describing, and you're right. But there will be a couple of franchises that will be like, I want to win the press conference. So I'm at a time when I need to hire draft an offensive lineman or defensive lineman right here, I'm going to draft a running back or a wide receiver. Don't you think there's franchises like that?
There might be one or two, but I do think the narrative in the NFL is I can get it back a little bit later on. Now, I can't get it back like Ashton Genty. I mean, he's a special guy. And it's just like when Bijan Robinson came out a couple years back, you say, that guy's a little different than the rest of the crew. So Genty is going to be a top 10 pick. Now, I think the big question mark will be what happens to, like, Hampton, what happens to Judkins, what happens to Henderson. And I do think Hampton will go in round 1, somewhere in round 1. Where I think you'll see maybe a little run is the 2 Ohio State backs in Henderson and Quinchon go in the second round. But after that, it's where the next one's going to go. Because now the league is sort of built on 3 receivers passing the ball in probably the leanest year for receivers I've seen in the last 5. You're not going to see as many receivers get picked. So the ones that are there, they're going to get picked a little bit higher. We almost looking at it economically here now. The supply and demand part is there for offensive linemen and receivers, and yet they don't have a lot of them. There's a lot of running backs. There's a lot of defensive linemen. Where I think you will see an even leaner part of things, and we may have talked about this, I know I've done it on other shows, is at the linebacker position. I wrote an article a few years back that I could see that the running back spot, you weren't going to have as many numbers-wise as in years past. When involved with 5 camps like I am, you see all these guys now, 7-on-7 sort of change things. And there's not as many corners. There's not as many running backs. But, when you line up the receivers for drills, you better get out of the way. Man, them guys, everybody wants to play receiver. The other part that I noticed, and I've seen it over the last 3 or 4 years, dramatically change. Linebackers. Bo, they're not there. So I see a 6'2", maybe 205-pound young man who's a sophomore in high school. Now, years ago, he would probably be a two-way player, but he's going to mostly play linebacker or defensive end in high school. When you're 15 years old and you're that size, you ask him, "Oh, what do you play today?" And, "Oh, no, sir, I don't play defense. I'm a receiver or I play tight end."
Uh-huh.
They're not even playing defense. And you're like, whoa. We had at the Louisiana line camp, we had 775 young men there. You know how many linebackers they signed in? You know how many linebackers signed in?
How many?
Of 775? 14.
Good grief, Mike.
Whoa. I could have took them on a little bus and driven them around, or on 2 golf carts, so to speak. It's stunning because years ago we didn't have 775. We were having 450 to 500, and there were 50 to 60 linebackers. Where have they all vanished to? You know what? They vanished to offense. I'm catching the ball. I'm playing tight end. I'm playing receiver. I'm not playing linebacker. Watch how it affects college football first. Take a look at that Alabama defense, LSU's defense. Georgia's going to feel it too. Ohio State, all recognized for bigger linebackers. Okay, they've come from those particular schools. Watch how many big linebackers they got today. Take a look at their rosters. Dramatically smaller at linebacker. So if I'm playing you, hey, and you smaller, I'm going to run the ball on you. So one domino hits another one. If I see that you're playing with a 215 or a 220-pound linebacker, and I'm going to run the ball right at him, yeah, he might be a good athlete and can maybe get around a few plays, but I'm going to beat you up.
Right, over the course of the game.
Watch how it changes college football first. And I think we're starting to see it. Take a good look at LSU's roster. LSU's always had linebackers. Always. Today, take a good look at them. They all 215, 220, maybe one that's 225. Take a look at Alabama's linebacker crew. They're not as big anymore. It is dramatically going to change college football first, and then the next domino to hit the NFL. That's what 7-on-7 has done. And it's changing that part of the game. There isn't as many corners. Okay, my 3 best receivers are going to be better than your 3 best corners.
Yeah.
And I'm going to beat you that way. But if I see you get smaller, and that's one thing the Eagles did very well. They figured this out. Teams are getting smaller on defense. Nickel, dime coverage. I'm talking about, they got some teams in this league, they start the game out with 5 defensive backs. And then on second down, you see 6. Okay, if I see 6 defensive backs, man, yeah, it can be 2nd and 9. Guess what I'm doing? I'm going to run it. And that's where the mismatches come into play. So it's a little bit of a chess game now. And I sit in on all these meetings that they have. And at Louisiana Line Camp last year, we had 13 NFL assistant coaches, and Pete Jenkins, who, he's, I guess, guidance counselor for I don't know how many teams, but and they all said the exact same thing. As a defensive coach now, they're going to beat us up. And where are the bigger linebackers that can run? That's why one guy in this draft class will get picked a lot higher than people think. That's Jalen Walker from Georgia. And Jalen's a little bit of a hybrid player in that he can be an off linebacker on first and second down. Obvious third down pass threat situations. Hey, Jalen, get up on the line of scrimmage. You see the guy who's going to catch the ball? Put him on his butt. And he knows what to do as far as pass rush moves and the ability to get off a bigger man. This is a very talented group of defensive edge people. You know what a lot of them can't do? They don't know how to use their hands. They don't know how to get off of a block. You're picking them because they're great athletes. Shamar Stewart is the great example. He's built like you would want a defensive end to be built like he's carved out of stone. And he's 6'5", and he's this great athlete. He doesn't have any body fat on him at all. Did Shamar Stewart make any game-changing plays that you watched if you watch A&M play? No. Didn't make any. He's sort of like a neophyte. He can't beat you with speed and quickness right off the bat. He does not know how to use his arms and hands well. The one guy that really made a great move, and I saw it this year from his A&M days, was Walter Nolan. Okay? And, personality-wise, he is who he is. But I know against LSU and other games that, I broke down like slide by slide by slide with him. LSU's offensive line were like, what the hell hit us with this guy? He was in the play, basically in the backfield as much as Nussmeier was. Every snap, he was there. And he, sort of tilted the field. But I see it more and more, and I understand with Pete Jenkins and Henry Thomas and some of these other guys kind of preach, man, we're getting all these great athletes, but they're not really well coached. And so a lot of these defensive linemen that are going to get picked in round one, terrific athletes, they play hard, they have speed and quickness, they have some power sets, and you just can't win with speed and power in the NFL. You better have a power set move with you. They don't know how to use their arms and their hands to get away from people. They really don't. So now we're at a point where, okay, I got the big man. Can he play? Can he get off of a big man block? Man, if I'm an offensive lineman and I see that you can't beat me after the first move, checkmate. I got you.
Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans, on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mike, if you had the perfect draft scenario for Jackson Dart, where does he fit?
I think he's a year one sit and watch, and to get accustomed to the game. I've always felt, it would be a great spot for him, the Rams. Sean McVay, and you sit behind Matt Stafford. And you sort of soak up everything that McVay's going to throw at you.
Yeah.
The other kind of deal here would be certainly Pittsburgh, where most likely Aaron Rodgers will be there this year, and you get to sit for at least a year to watch. If he comes to the Saints in some manner, now I don't think he'll be a top 10 pick, but let's say the Saints jump back in, let's say at 21 or 22 or whatever, I have a feeling that he's going to have to play a lot sooner. I don't know how long the leash is going to be with Derek Carr, because Derek is who he is. He's not going to change, not at his age. You got who you got. But perfect scenario for Jackson would be a first-round pick, and you watch for a year and soak it all in. And then year 2, hey, you got baton put in your hand and say, go with it. People say, well, that's unrealistic. Well, was it unrealistic for Patrick Mahomes? That's what happened to him. He sat and watched for a year. Alex Smith was the guy. See, people forget. They sort of forgetful about those sort of things. Joe Burrow had to play. Josh Allen, he had to play.
Right.
But I think for Jackson, the scenario would be to go to a pretty good team and to maybe watch for a year, and then you become the man. And, you could see a couple scenarios where that played out for some teams. If he goes to a New Orleans or Cleveland or the Giants, do you really think Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston is going to win you games in New York? No. They may win a few games. They ain't winning you squat. That's why Jameis Winston's bounced all over the board in the NFL. Russell Wilson, Sean, had enough after a year. What happened in Pittsburgh? Enough after a year. Now, all of a sudden, he's going to turn back into the Russell Wilson of maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. Won't happen. Can't wheel back the hands of time like that. So, with Jackson Dart, I think he will. In my opinion, I think he's a first-round pick quarterback. But I would not certainly pick him with a top 10 pick. But man, if he could have the dream scenario, it would be going round 1 and go to Los Angeles. And for a year, you watch, Matt Stafford and get that tutelage from a guy like Sean McVay.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. I mean, yeah. All right, Mike D on the Out of Bounds Show. At Mike Detillier on Twitter. Thanks, Mike D. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Bo.
He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. If you need a video wall for your school, hospital, business, soundcomav.com.